11-page stories.
Written through L.T. Zupan. Read by L.T. Zupan.
Story number 13. Contented. 1 Lendon went to Paris. The night's fog remained, but it had become less bubbly in its pocketing. Lendon spoke French fluently. He had for some time now. He prowled and strolled the city's night streets, moving in harmony with the essence of the foggy light arcing down from the street lamps. He was wearing all blacks and grays, something like a dress suit, and he had coarse black hair that formed a most complex, pointy, and visually reconciled or pleasing goatee. His skin was a pale white, and he looked rather drained, as if all of his colors had left him, and indeed they had. 2 Hannah and Diane lived in Paris. At a fine dining cafe they sat, facing each other at a table with sand-colored linen and a large circular window next to them. They had one of the best spots in the house, as they say. "It is magic hour," Hannah finally spoke, in beautiful, perfect French. She had held back a thought about a joke then, a joke about going to Belgium to get some French fries. Belgium fries, worth holding back. It was a reference point to what cinema filmmakers referred to dusk as. Hannah was not sure if magic hour included sunrise as well, but it should, as far as she was concerned. Diane took her meaning and lazingly quaffed back, as if exhaling out back a drawl from a cigarette. "The more magic, the better. I need more magic. Always need more magic." 3 Lendon rounded the corner to the left. The senses within his nostril passages flared. He committed an entire body stutter. A memory beyond his self, his immortal self, seemed to be distantly connected and ringing fiercely. Flaring was putting it lightly, he supposed. Up and to the left. Up and to the left. Through the little alley on the left. Some voice spoke through from whatever land, or non-land, really, that had originated or sourced his current flaring of senses. He did not wait or hesitate, and on through the alley it was. After 80 feet of perfect, graceful, poetic swiftness, it hit him. An aroma so lush, so red, and with lavender edges blossoming out. A fool would only say how very much he really needed that, though this was the surface truth. Beyond that was the amount of satisfaction and overwhelming fulfillment, even with the further hungering it did produce and would forever produce. He sucked from the perfume of her still miles away. Now he broke into a run, and everything was a blur until he reached her. With his capacities, obviously, it took mere minutes, not much more than an aria of darkest gray-black minuets. And then there she stood. He had rounded the very last corner, this one to the right, and she was already looking into him, aware early enough to know quite clearly that he was coming. She physically quivered. It was visible to even the average human, though none were around, of course. There was a fire in her eyes, dominating the rest of her and stifling her fears, her mortal shortcomings. It was a fire that came from some great part of her that was screaming out to connect with him. Some part of her that was older and more flared than the wrinkles in the veils of time's sand. They both knew that they both had known that, and had already moved on to the matter at hand. Her lips flushed and filled with a pink-red kind of blood. Her mouth opened, and she looked shyly down slowly to Lendon's feet. Lightning practically shot out of his eyeballs for her, towards her. 4... And then 3 days had passed since she had been turned by him. Lendon forced himself to break away from Hannah for the first time since they had met. Leaves were crunchy and dying and crinkly under his pricey, clocking shoe heels. For once and longer than he could remember, he was walking with no real reason and no real pain, just for the fuck of it, as they unfortunately say. The Parisian moonlight dripped blood from its orange, scaly rarity. Scuttling creatures dipped up from behind arrays of rocks and quickly back into their sub-world, hidden and obscured from anything bright or obvious. Diane broke her martini glass on the brick road ground. It glittered with its sounds, and it shattered and tinkled apart. She slowly began to grin. She was knowingly becoming drunk on Lendon's nearing. A sense had already begun to awaken in her, you see, ever since Hannah had disappeared. She stumbled further from the boozy, swanky martini parlor, where the former beverage had originated. She knew exactly how to fill a page, not to be blunt. A left. A sauntering and bobbling trepidation of a calculably recovered careen of a right. A straight. And yes, another left. Yes, uncapitalized. And her stare shot into the ground 5 feet in front of her, at an obtuse angle, and she slowly raised her acute glare. Her neck twinged delicately on purpose. The hairs around her groin raised. The blood in her eyeballs grew redder. And of course there he was, ready to turn her into one of the vampire, like he had Hannah. She screamed like tomorrow was never coming. He fled to her invitation faster than any of us could see, us being you. The piano tolled on. Blood poured through the moon, deep. 5... Even the wine doesn't stain around here. By all means, do not come. She knew. By she, I mean both of them. You see, because she could see, she could tell. From just the first keystrokes of a broken pendulum, broken open into something greater than 1 multiplied into 2. From the first reddest of the letterings, from the moment's first true depth. And that meant a lot, that she could tell. On every object, which contained every side or dimension of said objects, she knew. From the start. Anyways. The rooster does caw, obviously. And so now they were blessedly together. It had taken forever and worse. Painful to fathom, actually. And here they thankfully were now, risen above the clouds of shit that had forever burdened and disgraced and humiliated their souls. Together at last. Nothing to do now but progenerate and flourish and repeat. And so the 3 of them did. 6... Back to the same hourglass table the women had started at, this time with an addition. An addition within, we could say, as if there was any way to describe the new difference in a being once it had become one of the immortals. And Lendon, an addition without. They sat around their oval table, contemplatory. Fried duck and fish, with orange crimson blood burnt around the edges, there for display, for the guests abound. The novels merely extant, or tasked, or whichever, to comment on the tiredness the undeveloped masses bring to those with a trueness. needed not to exist at this new table, most gratefully. Those problems will always remain, but they have no palpable power around here, as they all knew. And they sat, and they surveyed. It had been an aeon since they spoke. Such a provoking, insufferable word Klingon is, it seems. But one thing no one can insult is that their invention of blood wine is divine. The title alone, of course, my dear dears. And Lendon trailed off, or rather trailed in, to his two primary mates. Trailed rather in. Yes, honey. Hannah crooked her mouth into a twisted resemblance of a frowning grin that was positively addicting. Yet, who shall provide it to us tonight? Diane continued, Hannah, without a pause. A red-haired, pale-skinned witch with a choker? A magenta ghost of our oceanic tormented longing? One of the Fae, and one of the Mare. 3, so deadly smooth. Hannah continued, and concluded by looking at those seated about the small, dark, ornate table. Their place, as well as their surroundings, had become darkened by their presence, much darker than it was only a few several days ago. Yes, Lendon finally spoke. All of that, please. And he smiled, truly innocently, for once. 7 ... And so they were hunting, stalking to begin with. Yes, and it was indeed a pale red-haired one with such beauty that made you not stall quite, but a descriptor superior, stall times 1100. And she was rather afraid, as humans tend to be of the immortals, when their dark death truly starts to shine into shallow human awareness. Terrified would be a closer word, alive even closer, my loves. Her terror was, of course, not causing her to run from the stalking trio of vampire lovers behind her. In fact, it was causing her to walk just fast enough to hyper-elevate her heart rate, to get her heart to pump and thrust its blood throughout her pale, frail, small, sad, tenuous frame, with all of its wanton tragedy and desperate ache, its indescribably beautiful nature, somehow living in an environment far more than disrespectful to that. That same terror then also caused her to slow and turn and face her predators. She had been prepared to spit vitriol in many word forms and subsets of courage, but when she connected with the vampire's eyes, all of that started to change. Blood, I love your hair. Darling red. Diane taunted to her. Where do? The witch-human redhead tried to say back. Oh yes, we will always come from something you can't understand, like ourselves, and him. Diane killed her attempt with that sentence, and Lendon lunged. Such magic, he said, and breathed into her as he pulled her head back by her bright, fiery red hair. Such magic, my love. And he plunged his fangs into her young, pure, white, narrow neck, and began to pull all of her blood out of her eloquent body. Hannah and Diane watched in beyond sophomoric anticipation and extreme kinetic arousal, dripping. 8 ... The red-haired girl was dead. Some number of years less than 20 she had been. Now her corpse lay under the alley, forgotten by all, rotting and putrefying, for all the centipedes, maggots, worms, and roaches to feed on and upon. The vampire lover trio was back at their closest thing to what you could call a home. They were lying together, drifting off and resting, and coming back to, all together, and really rather contented, in fact. Your poor mothers, Lendon half-whisper muttered. What would they think of it all now? and he smiled with utter genuinity. They would lament the need for children or parents in the beautifully dark, languid world of our immortal love, as they deep down already have and do. Hannah poeted, such soft amber salandry celic. Diane finished. But what of your sisters? Lyndon prodded. Exactly. Both chorused in utter return. 9 ... Lyndon sat alone on the outdoor stoop by their backyarding, on the house they definitely owned. He was deep in thought. What discoveries awaited him? How would he adapt, and how long would it take to encompass his new reality? No question mark. Only statement. The new reality he had broken into. The one where an immortal meant to only know pain by its very nature had devised a situation where it actually felt good, probably soon enough, he surmised. And the discoveries, well, he imagined there would be many, all the same, yet all different. Perhaps, he mused, it's the next evolution of the next evolution, a synergy to take it all even further. And why not? Why not? 10 ... Bon Bao. Bon Bao D, etc. A scooter, or motorbike, shouted from the recesses. Diane and Hannah were on their way to a rooftop sky bar in their new Southeast Asia abode. They walked into the La Maison Hotel and proceeded up to the 21st floor. A beautiful expanse was before the two of them. We make a pretty good team, Hannah. Diane smiled. They were feeling especially horny, though not sexual at all, that night. Yes, Diane, with your guidance. Diane paused and smiled, satisfied. Well, you're a good student. At what you need to fucking learn, that is. What you must still learn. For a long time to come. A very, very long time still, I'm afraid. Yes. Yes, I am a good student. Hannah demurely spoke, trying to please Diane as much as possible. Diane shuddered and then stroked Hannah. Oh, how I love you, woman. They dove into each other's post-souls via a spiral stare. So who do we find next for him and us? They both thought. Simultaneity. Nothing else to do but be content. 11 ... Like sucking the marrow out of a strawberry, you are. Lyndon thought into the young nun the three of them were devouring. Messy quotes, he also said. Messy, the level of horror bestowed by her. A charred-out lament. Beautiful. Their relationship was contented. They went from place to place, fucking to death those they dreamed of to do so, never turning them, always savoring, and just when that seemed to be a staleness, well, they just continued to further on. 12 ... And now it was 2029, futuristic only to the past. National politics had finally begun to become trumped by global awareness, and moreover and more importantly, global standards. Women had walked on Mars. Iran had quit torturing humans as much. Hoverboards were more common. Somehow Spielberg was still kicking and still making epic features. Lyndon and his tribe were as fresh as ever. They strolled together in 3 a.m. Norway, suburbia, an environment as cold as Satan's clit, and still beautifully colder. Their subtle expressions remarked to each other the appreciation of each other's visible, freezing exhale puffs style. They moved with such deep emotional satisfaction, a satisfaction mortals can't understand, but maybe can have hints of understanding from those times in their life they have felt truly at home emotionally and deeper. Those times that really are rare and only happen a few times in your life. And well, that is what they now had come to the point of being able to walk around with. Actually walk around with on a regular basis. And this is what they did now. Just waiting for a dark breeze of the late AM cold that no one walked around in to carry them to their next curve or turn. And so it did. A dark, frozen playground went by on their right. A frozen dead rat was near the jungle gym. Red turned to crystallized dark ruby, outlined by black. Turned to sunny ant food only during the approved 3 or 6 sunny hours of the ants. They walked and walked and walked on. You know, when you have a love like they do, you can even relish the pain of not achieving and the hurt of hungering, especially the sorrow of loss. The blade of disappointment kissing your eyes and dreadlocking your hair, tensing your brow and your tired, worried heart. Hoping for the best in a world of killers with no regard for that hope. But still, hoping like a child, alas. They walked together, so together. Unbelievably, only doing what they really should. 13 ... They came upon a very short 18-year-old female human, maybe 4'4". London surmounted the distance. Hannah grabbed her and she began to cry clear tears. "Why are you here?" she jutted, in surprisingly cutting questioning. "Because you are done with this shell of life, Coil," Diane replied, and they spread her apart. Hannah and Diane looked at her in their mutual forced, coerced embrace, and both started crying blood for her, and for her ultimate well-being. Lendon cut into her neck with his triangular-ish canine bicuspids, while the girls fed from the small one's vagina quite literally, by biting and then sucking excessive blood from its pink. The 4 of them throbbed in unison for 5 to 7 minutes, all staring at her eyes the whole time, literally feeding off of her fear until her body died in the unforgiving cold of Norwegian winter's wood, until the spirit of the scene finally collapsed and they respectfully cast her vessel aside, gulping the last of the essence. They sat, eventually slowly gathered themselves and stood staring at each other, and then finally stared up at the Norwegian moon. After some time they began to migrate home. This had been a particularly satisfying twilight evening. 14 ... And now a millennia had gone by, and they were still here, the 3 of them and their countless other lovers, though they were only countless because of the passage of another 1,000 years. Throughout this time, their love had only deepened, their skill together, ultimately their appreciation. They had done everything that any lovers could do together, and somehow the flower, no, the lotus of their love, had only strengthened, much more than endured through the passing of time. Yes, they were more experienced, but that had only made their immortal selves younger in spirit, older in action, of course. 15 ... They were sitting in their back sky yard, as they were now calling them, the fucking mortals. Around their fountain, they all looked at each other at the same time. A beautiful sense of romantic violence grew within them all. They locked their fangs into each other's necks at the same time, and all sucked and circulated their soul blood, forever together. much more than contented, than the words ever describe.